He has spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
You know, it amazes me sometimes the number of people who let just a little phrase slip. A little phrase, a little incident, a little moment. Sometimes the little phrase isn't even spoken. It's more demonstrated than spoken. There's a little something that happens that you think, nobody noticed that. It was no big deal. And yet you realize a little later, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, sometimes years or decades, that moment, that one moment left an indelible mark in the hearts of the person that you were having that conversation, even a silent conversation with. Listen, wise leaders manage even the micro narratives. That's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. And I can tell you throughout the course of my life, it's been those little moments where someone said something very profound in a single sentence or two, or they said nothing at a time when I really needed them to say anything, just to acknowledge that I was there. I can tell you of moments just in the last couple of years where a moment that I thought was, whatever, it just happened, became a moment that others looked back on and said, that was huge to me. In fact, I can tell you of 2 of them that are remarkable as I recall them, but in the moment, it didn't seem like anything to me. The first one, I was in the Congo several years ago, and as I was walking with my interpreter and his fiancée through the streets of Kinshasa, there was a time that we hear footsteps running up behind us. And I kind of glance over my shoulder using the reflection of the building that we were walking past to see this person that looked like they might have nefarious intent running up behind us, and they were gathering speed. They were speeding up as they were getting closer. Well, in the trio, it was me close to the street, and then my interpreter, and then his fiancée on the far right side closest to the building. But she had her purse on that right shoulder closest to the building. And as I heard those footsteps getting closer and closer, I slowed my pace a little bit and I stepped to the right a little bit so that in order for that purse snatcher, if that's what they decided to do, to grab that purse, they'd have to reach through my big gut to get to it. Well, that individual glanced off my shoulder, turned and went around the next corner, never to be seen or heard from again. I thought nothing of it. I would have done the same thing if it was my sister, if it was my friend, if it was an absolute stranger, or if it was my wife. I would have reacted the same way. Get in the way, don't let them have the purse. How hard is that? I didn't think anything of it. The next day, my interpreter shows up at the hotel where we're about to do our event, and his fiancée is with him. And he says, my fiancée wants to know if she can give you a hug. I'm like, okay. So she gave me a hug. She was crying, and he explained that she is a biracial person, and even in the Congo, she's a complete misfit, a complete outsider. No one accepts her. There's no part of society there that considers her the norm. She's an outcast. Call it racial, call it religious, whatever you want to call it, whatever label you want to put on it. Because she was different, she was outcast. And her words through him back to me were, I've never had anyone who cared enough about me as an individual to defend me as a person, much less a white man. Frankly, I was stunned. I was shocked. Again, this is a micro narrative. This is two people in the middle of the night walking down the street, and the incident was over in seconds. I am still friends almost 8 years later on Facebook with that young lady. She didn't marry the guy that she knew at the time. She's married somebody else, moved on with her life, and seems to be doing very, very well. But we're still friends on Facebook. We still have a connection because of a moment in time. Now, the narrative of influence that we expect sometimes is it's the monologues, it's the diatribes, it's the long, lengthy, it's all the books that we've shared with them. And no, it's not. Sometimes it's a moment. It's a second of time. I remember during the Great American Speak-Off back in October, November of last year in Dallas. I was in the hotel. As we walked in the hotel, my wife said, I'm going to go refresh my makeup and then we'll find our space. Well, they hadn't opened the doors yet, so we couldn't get in the ballroom. And so here are all these speakers in the competition. They're wandering around all over. You can see many of them, the eyes closed, but they're memorizing their speech, and they peek from time to time at their notes. And you can tell they're rehearsing. They're getting ready for this big event. And I saw one person pretty much walking in a figure eight. And as they were walking, they were rehearsing, and they came to a quiet point and stopped, and I realized they're standing next to a column, but they don't have any stuff on the floor, so I don't know if this is their spot or just where they ended up. So I just stepped up and said, can I join you in this space? And a dialogue started, and we had a conversation, and we shared some background history and some notes, and what are you up to, and why are you here, and what do you hope to gain, and what do you hope will be next? And as we had that conversation, my wife walked up and joined us. We all took a picture together. We all were cutting up together. We all went and did our competitions and went our separate ways. At the end of the day, I had a golden ticket to go on to Miami, and this other person didn't. But as we were getting ready to leave, my wife and I stopped again to charge our phones and then hit the restroom before we went outside. On our way to the escalator, this individual came up, turned to my wife and said, "Can I please hug your husband?" Again, I'm thinking, what did I do now? And after the hug, she said, "You saw me. Out of all of these people here, I don't know why you talked to me, but our conversation before we started was probably the most encouraging conversation I've had in decades." Micro narratives. They take moments, but they can change the direction of a life. Yesterday afternoon, we visited a new church just to see how things are in this new community that we're in. And they just happened to be having an after-church shindig, is what they called it, a post-Easter shindig. And so we were standing around in the parking lot like everybody else was. We'd had our hot dogs, and we were enjoying a snow cone. And I watched a little boy, probably 4 or 5, about the age of my grandson, walking through the parking lot with his little brother and his mom and his dad. And Dad noticed somebody that he apparently wanted to go say hi to, stopped where he was at, made an abrupt turn, and the little guy, staring at his snow cone instead of his dad, ran into Dad's backside and knocked the snow cone out of his hand, and it fell on the floor, on the ground in the parking lot. Dad scolded him, pushed him back for running into him. I don't think I heard him say anything to him, but the little guy just lost it. He melted like the snow cone. He fell apart. He was crying. In his world, the world was over. He collapsed to the ground in tears, devastated. Well, Mom's trying to manage the other little guy and keep up with her snow cone too. And so I just looked at her. I said, "Is it okay if he gets another one?" She said, "Yeah." So I reached my hand down and he grabbed my finger and I walked him over and we got him a snow cone. His face looked like I had bought him the world. The snow cones were free. All you had to do was put your own stuff on it. But I did ask him, "Do you want a flat top one or do you want a big puffy top one?" He said, "I want the big puffy top one." I said, "You want one flavor or you want 3 flavors?" He goes, "Oh, I just want the blue one with the berries." I said, "Oh, you like blue raspberry?" That was our entire conversation. But that little guy's face lit up. His world changed from collapsed to a little bit of hope, at least. It was nothing more than a snow cone. It cost me absolutely nothing. Maybe you've heard that ancient phrase, no greater love has a man than this, that he would lay down his life for a friend. Let me tell you something. I am a firefighter. I've been a soldier. I have no qualms whatsoever about laying down my life for a friend, charging into a burning building, dragging people out of burning cars. Been there, done that. Sometimes the hardest laying down your life for a friend is to realize when it's not your moment, but it's theirs. To realize when all it's going to take is a sidestep to the right. When all it's going to take is taking the little guy to get another snow cone. When all it's going to take is a very short, very brief, but very sincere conversation. You'd be amazed sometimes at the ability that you have to transform someone else's life with a really small story. A couple of words of encouragement. A genuine acknowledgement that they exist. To honor them just for being them. Whether you like them or not, is not relevant. Whether you agree with them or not, also not relevant. Whether they're your best friend or an absolute stranger, not relevant. Wise leaders know to manage the micro narratives. Oh yeah, we know they're big narratives all over the universe, some as old as the universe itself. Some of the narratives that drive our behavior every day, they come to us through technology, they come to us through ancient books, they come to us through old beliefs and ideas that we've held on to, some accurate and some not so much. Some of them are based in truth, cold hard facts. There has never been a cold volcano. Volcanoes don't do cold. Because they're made of stuff that's hot coming up out of the earth. There are no cold volcanic eruptions. I don't care if you like that to be true or not. It's just true. Water is wet. I don't care if you like it to be true or not. It's just true. And some of the narratives in our universe are that kind of true. I don't care if you like them or not. They just are. But some of the narratives that we live our lives by, our daily conversations, our friendships, our relationships, our expectations of others, our attitudes, they're just little tiny micro narratives. They're less like the ocean and more like the bubbles. I don't mean the bubbles in the ocean. When we did an Easter event a couple of weeks ago, and the guy had this big, giant string, and it had just a whole lot of little loops of different sizes on it, and he would dip it in a bucket, a giant bucket, like a wash bucket of bubble soap. And then he would throw it up in the air, and it would create bubbles of all sizes, and they would go all over the place. And when they would catch the wind, they would drift 20 or 30 feet. And I remember watching the little kids, the 2- and 3-year-olds, just stare in awe at these bubbles as they passed in the wind. Some would try to poke them. Some would try to catch them. Some would try to eat them. That's got to be nasty because that's just soap. But the way they reacted to these bubbles are the same way that many people react to micro-narratives, little stories. Some are fascinated. Some get saturated in them. Some hold on to them for as long as they can until they burst. Some are impacted by them with just a sense of joy, and some, like the dogs, kind of run from them like, what is that thing and why is it chasing me? Some of the bubbles that he made that day were nickel size. Some of the bubbles he made that day were long, drawn-out bubbles. They would take a minute or two to develop, and when they were done, they were this giant orb floating through the sky, and they would change shape as they moved, but they were always colorful and filled with rainbows until someone chased them down and popped them. You have narratives like that too. Some the size of a nickel, some long and drawn out, some more explanatory and visual from a long way away, and others more like the ocean. They're just steady, they're constant, they're consistent, they're always there, and they're never changing. And even as things change within them, think of all of the sea life going on in the ocean. Still just a giant body of water. I think there's 5 oceans on the earth? but each of them has its own ecosystem within it. Each of them has living creatures within the ocean that are different than the other oceans. You've got the Dead Sea, a very large body of water with nothing alive in it. What's the difference between those? Well, they're very much like those narratives that are as old as the oceans, as consistent as the oceans, as trustworthily wet as the oceans, but they all have their own ecosystem within them. They all have different things living inside them. Narratives are very much the same way. They follow the shape of whatever they're in, whether that's your organization or your mindset or your lifestyle or your book or your relationships. And as you lose control of them, they become floods or tempest in a teacup, which become a hurricane and can wipe out cities and societies. And that's the nature of this world that we live in. We can't always manage the hurricanes. We can be prepared for them. We can't always manage where the wind is going to take the bubbles. We can enjoy them. We can watch them. We can create them. But a wise leader will always manage the micro narratives, even the unspoken words, even the gestures that go a long way into building and sustaining relationships. And if as a leader you're not taking the time to do that today, to consciously and intentionally manage those micro narratives, have a conversation with a stranger. Have a conversation with someone that you know needs to hear a word of encouragement. Take the time to be a part of their life. It matters. It's huge. It can make a life and death difference in some people's lives. I never forget the story from Jack Canfield's book, Success Principles, about the man who jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge. When they went to his home, they found a suicide note on the inside of the door. And all it said is, if one person says hello to me today, I won't jump. Hello can be a micro narrative. It doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out story. It's a gesture. It's a phrase. It's a greeting. It's to honor someone's presence, if nothing else. Wise leaders do that. I expect you to do that. Take some time today to manage the micro narratives in the lives of the people that you encounter, even if they're strangers, even if you don't like them, even if you don't agree with them. They're human. They deserve it, and they'll think better of you for doing it. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
I'm Chris Knowles, and I just finished taking J Loren Norris's Story Power Masterclass, and it was so worth the time, so worth the money. Really not someone that knows how to get up and speak in front of people, but he really made me feel comfortable, and he broke everything down in a way that I could understand it, and helped me formulate a vision that I know that I'll use for the future. Thank you.